The Candy Corn Man by A.W. Smith. Growing up, your neighborhood probably had its own local spooky stories the kids would tell each other. Stories that nobody knew the origins of. Well, I know exactly where the story of the Candy Corn Man in my neighborhood in Utah came from. I'm the one that made it up. This started when I was 11 and my brother Michael was 7. So it would have been around 2002. There was an abandoned house we'd walk by on the way home from school. And any of you who grew up in smaller towns probably had at least one of those around. The Candy Corn Man. He lived in that house. I told Michael that one day in September. Well, nobody was sure he was actually a man, since nobody had actually gotten a good look at him. All anybody knew was that he smelled like sardines and that he had very long fingers that had an extra 2 or 3 knuckles so that they could bend and flex in ways our fingers can't. If you didn't want him to bother you, you had to make sure to put a couple of pieces of candy corn on the front step of the creepy house every day in October until Halloween. Candy corn was his favorite. That's why his name was the Candy Corn Man. And you should never make him angry, because the Candy Corn Man could track you down no matter what. Michael believed me wholeheartedly, and I still feel bad about that. I shouldn't have lied to him, even if he was just a kid. He still believed in Santa at that point, and since you gave cookies and milk to Santa, he guessed it made sense to give candy corn to the Candy Corn Man. Michael believed me so much that he told all the other kids in the neighborhood about the Candy Corn Man, and soon enough, everyone knew about him. I was pretty proud about my successful storytelling and even bragged about it in secret to my parents. As the weeks went by, I started to hear variations of the story from the neighborhood kids, variations that I hadn't invented. Like that the Candy Corn Man wore a bowler hat, or that he was the ghost of a child kidnapper. The Candy Corn Man was becoming a neighborhood legend in its own regard. Michael took it upon himself to put 3 or 4 pieces of candy corn in front of the door of the house every day in October. And of course, they would be gone when he came back the next day. It was raccoons, probably. So it just made him believe even more. So he would tell the other neighborhood kids, which stoked even more excitement. He even started taking his friend Jordan, a fellow believer in the Candy Corn Man, every evening. "We're going to feed the Candy Corn Man," they'd tell my mom and dad. And mom and dad would smile and tell them to be safe. 11-year-old me thought that the whole thing was hilarious. I really should have been nicer to Michael. Because Michael went missing 2 days before Halloween. According to his teachers, he had left school that day, but he never made it home. I remember all the policemen at my house. Our town had only about 30,000 people, and kids didn't go missing very often. My mom was distraught. She had pulled up the couch next to the front door and slept there, hoping that Michael would walk through the door. My dad didn't go to work, of course. He would be out in the car, driving around and trying to call out for Michael. The police said they were doing everything they could. I cried. I cried a lot. Halloween was canceled at our house when it came, of course. Michael had been missing for 3 days by the 31st, and I didn't want to go trick-or-treating without Michael. I popped Hocus Pocus into the VHS player while my mom sat on the couch by the front door. I wasn't really watching it. I just wanted Michael. Around 5, before any trick-or-treaters would have been coming, the doorbell rang. My mom eagerly answered it. But it was only Jordan, Michael's friend. He was holding an entire bag of candy corn. "I have to feed the Candy Corn Man, but I'm scared by myself," he said to my mom. "Can you come with me?" My mom scolded Jordan and cursed his parents. He really shouldn't be out by himself. Jordan pointed out that if she went with him, he wouldn't be alone. He was a smart 7-year-old. She sighed and told him that she really needed to be home in case Michael showed up. But the old house was close enough and it was still light out. So she agreed to send me with Jordan. so long as I took her cell phone and my pocket knife. Looking back, she probably shouldn't have let me go, but she was exhausted and distraught. So, Jordan and I walked to the old house. When we got there, it looked just as abandoned and creepy as ever. And the fact that it was Halloween, it made it worse. "Mr. Candy Corn Man," Jordan called out to the house. "I heard from Robbie down the street that you grant wishes. I brought you a whole bag of candy corn today. I just wish that you would bring Michael back. I miss him. Thank you." He asked for my pocket knife and I gave it to him, and he slit the bag open and dumped the contents of the entire bag in front of the door. Candy corn went everywhere. The raccoons are gonna have a feast tonight, I thought. "I hope Michael comes back," said Jordan. I told him that I did too. And that's when we saw it. 2 long fingers slowly and quietly slid out from under the gap of the door. They were thin and gritty looking, and I swear that they had more knuckles than was natural. Jordan and I immediately froze. From the size of his eyes, I could tell that this had never happened before. The fingers fumbled quietly for a second or two, but they eventually found a piece of candy corn and closed around it, and they slowly retracted again under the gap until they disappeared. And from behind the door, we heard the soft sound of opened mouth chewing. Jordan and I ran as fast as our legs could carry us, and we didn't stop until we got to my house. We told my mom what we had seen. She didn't believe us. I don't blame her. She knew I was the one who had made up the candy corn man after all. I walked Jordan back to his house, where we freaked out a little more. I only had a few hours to stew over what I had seen, however, because the police knocked on our door at around 10 o'clock that night with Michael. He was a little pale and wrapped in a shock blanket, but he appeared physically fine. An ambulance had checked him out. We hugged him like crazy. My mom cried, my dad cried. I was too overwhelmed, and I just hugged Michael without saying anything. He hugged me back weakly, but told us that he just wanted to go to bed. The policeman asked for a moment alone with my parents, so they told me to take Michael to his bedroom and tuck him in. I did so. I think Michael was asleep before his head hit the pillow. I was making my way back to the living room when I heard the police speaking in low tones. I figured I wasn't meant to hear this conversation, so I stayed behind the corner and eavesdropped. "We got a call about 2 hours ago about a person who wasn't moving in a park about a half an hour north of here," one of the cops said. On site, police found the body of a man, mid-40s, lying on the grass. His neck was completely broken. It looked like his head was on backwards. He had finger-shaped bruises around his neck, real long, strong fingers. Whoever did this guy in must have been Superman. Anyway, we found Michael in a parked car in the parking lot, sleeping. He ID'd the dead man as his kidnapper, but he's really fuzzy on any details about what happened. We're not gonna press him on that any further. He's safe, and that's what matters. To this day, Michael can't remember what happened. We think he suppressed the memory, but I made sure to leave candy corn on the step of that house every day during every October that followed. I still do, 16 years later. And every Halloween, I dump an entire bag on the porch. Raccoons probably get most of it,